The first thing to say about Brigsby Bear is when you see even the poster or the name or anything of Brigsby Bear, you think that's got to be a Sundance Festival favourite, hasn't it? And you look it up, yeah, of course it is a Sundance Festival.
Why do you think? And why do you think?
Because it is a film that is, for all that may be good or bad about it, it is a film that has virtually been machine tooled to be a Sundance Film Festival favourite.
And what would that involve?
It's quirky, it's offbeat, it's indie, it's sometimes cute, it's sometimes cutesy. It's got one of those names that makes you go, Do you remember there was that song called Things That Make You Go,
Yeah, CNC Music Factory.
It is, yeah. So basically, I didn't know that was who it was. Okay, so basically, Brigsby Bear is a film that if you had got a bunch of scientists together in a laboratory and said, "I would like you to concoct for me a Sundance Festival favourite," this is what they would have come up with. So, co-writer and star Carl Mooney is a young man who has been raised in artificial isolation. He's had this completely isolated existence. He lives in a bunker with the people he refers to as mum and dad, and you can't go outside because the air is toxic and the air is poisonous. And all he knows really about the world is through a series called Brigsby Bear, which is about the intergalactic adventures of a strange cartoon character. A strange, not cartoon, real life, but somebody wearing, not a real bear, somebody dressed as a bear having a cronky television show, which he watches on old-style VHS tapes. And he goes on his computer and he goes on to discussion groups about what Brigsby Bear is about. His father occasionally allows him to go up onto the roof, meaning up onto ground level, in which they are in a kind of silent running type eco-dome, and look out at the world in which there's all this pollution and all this toxicity, so they can't get out in it. And his father, conveniently, is played by Mark Hamill.
So what's on your mind, pal?
It's just, there are other people out there, just like us, right? And we're all watching Brigsby together. It means something.
Look at the grazer bugs, James. All they need in this world is fresh water and cold moonlight to charge their rectoskeletons. They're out there every night, surviving just like us. The difference is, we have dreams and imaginations to help us escape. And no one can take that away from you. Ever.
The best way of describing this film is probably with reference to other films. So it's essentially Dogtooth, the Yorgos Lanthimos film Dogtooth, meets Galaxy Quest via Son of Rambo in Room, presented by Bungle from that once popular kids' TV programme Rainbow.
Right.
In the case of Room, there was always this problem about how much you could talk about what would happen inside the room and what might happen outside the room. In the case of Brigsby Bear, it's not a problem because it's very, very early on. He is brought out of the isolation. He discovers that he's actually been brought up in a completely artificial bubble under circumstances which he didn't understand. And he now struggles to make sense of the world around him. And in fact, the only way he can make sense of the world around him is by referring back to his tapes of Brigsby. And when he realises that there is no more Brigsby coming because he is now in the real world and actually all this pollution that he was told about isn't true, and Brigsby is not, in fact, some world phenomenon, but he is the only person who has ever seen Brigsby, he realised that the only way of filling the hole in his life is to take on the mantle of making a Brigsby movie to complete the story which he needs to be completed. Now, when I said that thing about, Sundance, quirky / irksome, that's exactly what I meant. It's a really odd little film. There are things in it that are sort of quite touching and insightful. There are things in it that don't work at all. There are times that it stretches the boundaries of its conceit beyond breaking point, but when it's working, and when what it's doing is looking at this kind of slightly Forrest Gump-like character, an innocent out in the world that they don't understand, not quite getting a handle on the language, and thinking that the world actually has been defined by this strange talking bear series which he's been watching on VHS, and then weirdly breathing real life into that thing. It kind of works up to a point. It's got some interesting ideas, as I said. If you know Yorgos Lanthimos' Dogtooth, in which a father basically keeps his children within their house and within the garden because he doesn't want them to go out into the real world, which is very much a political allegory. And he tells them that aeroplanes aren't big aeroplanes very high up. They're very small aeroplanes very close down, and you can't go out into the garden because the cat is a lethal creature. And he sort of creates this whole artificial environment by which to entrap them within his home because he doesn't want them to go out into the world. That's a sort of a touchstone. All the stuff of Jacob Tremblay in Tremblay in Room, only knowing the world as the room. Room went every way to each corner. In fact, he's talking about a very small space. Galaxy Quest, that idea about a television series that's creaky and cronky that comes to mean something more than it ever could have meant, and suddenly the people that were involved in making it seem to take on a strange significance. And Son of Rambo, or even Be Kind Rewind, that idea of, let's make it ourselves, let's do it in a kind of homegrown DIY fashion. It's odd. It shambles from one piece to the next. It has a certain momentum to it. It did lose me a couple of times, but it has a kind of odd, quirky, offbeat charm that has moments in it, individual moments that kind of justify the shambling whole.